and also to the organizers and sponsors who helped put this together. It's really great to be back in Charlotte and also see so many old friends. What I thought I would do is actually start with a scene from the book. And for this, you have to imagine yourself in Iraq. And ahead of you is what looks like a piece of trash alongside the road. But that insurgent is hidden that IED, that improvised explosive device, with great care. Now, by 2006, there were more than 2,500 of these roadside bombings in Iraq every single month. And they were the leading cause of casualties among both American soldiers as well as Iraqi civilians. Now, the team that's hunting for this IED, for this roadside bomb, is called an EODT, Explosive Ordnance Disposal. They're the pointy end of the spear in the effort to stop roadside bombings. If you've seen the movie Hurt Locker, it's about one of these bomb squads in the military. Now, in a typical tour in Iraq, an EOD team will go out on just about 600 bomb calls. That is, they'll be asked to defuse 2 bombs every day. The number, though, that's the better indicator of their value to the war effort is the fact that the insurgents put a reported $50,000 bounty on the head of an EOD trooper. Kill one of these soldiers, get $50,000. Unfortunately, this particular bomb call would not end well. By the time the soldier got close enough to the device to see that it wasn't a piece of trash, that it was a bomb by the telltale wires coming out from it, it exploded. Now, depending on how much explosives is packed into one of these devices, you have to be as far away as a football field to escape death or injury from the fragments coming at you at bullet speed. In fact, the sheer force of the explosion itself can break your limbs, even if you're not hit by one of those fragments. The soldier, though, had been right on top of that IED when it exploded. And so when the dust settled and the smoke cleared, the rest of their team advanced, and they found little left. And that night, the commander of the unit did his sad duty. He sat down to write a condolence letter back to the U.S. He apologized for not being able to bring that soldier home. He talked about how tough the loss was on the rest of the unit. They felt they'd lost their bravest soldier. And then he tried to talk up the silver lining that he took away from the tragedy. And this is what he wrote, quote, "At least when a robot dies, you don't have to write a letter to its mother." That is, that scene is the story of the very first robot killed in action. That soldier was a 42-pound robot called a PackBot. The destination of that condolence letter wasn't to some farmhouse in Iowa like in the old war movies. It was actually to an office building just outside Burlington, Massachusetts, that on the side of it says, iRobot. It is a real-world company named after the fictional Isaac Asimov novels and the not-so-great Will Smith movie, in which robots start out doing daily chores. I should add, iRobot, the real-world company, also makes the Roomba, the little robot vacuum cleaner. That is, robots that started out doing chores and moved on to making life and death decisions. And what I'd like to do is actually, if Skynet lets it work here, we're going to have a slideshow. And it's not going to be a typical slideshow. I'm not going to click through. It's just simply going to play while I speak. And it's to give you a sense, as the dean introduced, of the reality of this. That is, everything that you're going to see is a picture or a video of a robot already active in Iraq or Afghanistan, or already at the prototype stage. Nothing is from the realm of science fiction. Nothing's powered by Vulcan technology. Nothing's from the world of fantasy. Nothing depends on teenage wizard hormones to work. This is the real deal when we're talking, though, about war. Now, to pull back on all of this, Wired for War, the book, is about how something big is going on in war today, and maybe even the history of humanity itself. The U.S. military went into Iraq with a handful of drones, pilotless planes, unmanned aerial systems, whatever you want to call them. We went in with a handful in 2003. We now have over 7,000 in the U.S. military inventory. We went into Iraq with 0 unmanned ground vehicles like that PackBot. We now have over 12,000 in the U.S. military inventory. To give you another sense of the sea change that we're experiencing, This year, the U.S. Air Force will train more unmanned systems operators than it will train manned fighter plane and bomber plane pilots combined. But we need to remember, when we're talking about these PackBots, when we're talking about these Predator drones, we're talking about the equivalent of the Model T4, the Wright Brothers Flyer. We're talking about the very first generation. And so what that means is that the term killer app is taking on a very different meaning. That is, killer app, short for killer application, usually describe technologies that had a disruptive effect on an industry. So the iPod was a killer app to the music industry, changed the rules of the game. When we are arming a robot with everything from a 50 caliber machine gun to a Hellfire missile, killer app takes on an entirely new meaning. It's not just disruptive, it raises a whole host of new questions. And the important thing here, though, is that that's what's happening right now. One of the people that I interviewed for the book was the U.S. Air Force 3-star general, and he said, it's not going to be thousands of robots as in our wars today, but very soon, quote, tens of thousands of robots. And it's not going to be tens of thousands of these robots, but tens of thousands of the prototype ones you're going to see, and the ones after that. Because one of the things that we have going on in technology is a rule that we call Moore's Law. Moore's Law is the fact that we've been able to pack more and more computing power into our microchips, such that they basically have doubled in their power and capacity every 2 years. There's a good illustration of Moore's Law. How many people in this room have ever received one of those Hallmark greeting cards that opened up and played a little song? Just raise your hand. If you've ever held one of those cards in your hands, you had more computing power than the entire U.S. Air Force did in 1960. In that one card. That's Moore's Law in action, that doubling year after year after year. So what happens over the next 25 years if Moore's Law holds true? Our technology, our computers, our robots will be 1 billion times more powerful than today within 25 years. And I don't mean the kind of amorphous way people use the phrase a billion. I mean literally multiply them with a 1 and 9 zeros behind it. But what if Moore's Law doesn't hold true? Yeah, it's held true over the last 40 years. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to hold true over the next 25. What if, for example, technology moves at a pace that's just 1/100th as fast? Well, then our computers, our robots, will be a mere 1 million times more powerful than today. So the point here is this. The kind of things that we used to only talk about at science fiction conventions like Comic-Con are becoming an important issue in the halls of power. They're becoming a point of debate within the Pentagon. We're living through a robots revolution. Now, I need to be very, very clear here. When I say robots revolution, I don't mean that the governor of California is going to show up at your door all with the Terminator movies. It's not that kind of revolt of the machines. It's the idea that every so often in history, a technology comes along and changes the rules of the game. A technology like the printing press, gunpowder, the computer, the atomic bomb. It is a technology that has incredible new power, but more importantly, it raises incredible new questions. Questions about what's possible that we never imagined possible before. Questions about what's proper, questions of right and wrong that we never had to debate about before. These are very rare in history. But it's interesting, when I went out and I was asking people about what do they think the historic parallel of robotics is, the answers that they would give. Many of the scientists in the field would say, it's about where the automobile was back in 1909, 1910. And think about the phrasing of that. Back then we called them the horseless carriage. A lot like how we in the military call robots unmanned systems. We can only sort of describe them by what they are not, rather than what they are. But think about the automobile. Why was it important? It wasn't the fact that you didn't need to own 4 horses anymore. It was the ripple effects that it had beyond. For example, it leads to the mechanization of war. It also has other kinds of ripple effects. For example, before the automobile, you don't have suburbia. American City is changed by this invention. Social relationships are changed. You don't have the idea of dating. Kids courted on their parents' front porch. You have a new requirement for literally rules of the road that you never had to have before. And these rules required an understanding of this new technology.